readers. My name is Charity, the host of Birchtrovert Reader Podcast. I'm introverted, but willing to talk about fantasy books. On this podcast, I'll do book reviews, author interviews, and fantasy book discussions. Come join me every week as I explore new realms and talk to amazing people. Hi, this is Charity, your host of Birchtrovert Reader. I have an amazing guest with me today. Her name is Linda Ling. She is the author of All That Glitters Is Not Gold. And I invited her on this podcast to talk about her new book. Miss Linda, tell me about you and you wrote.
Right. So, as you already know, I live in Asia and I'm an author, but my secret identity is that in the daytime, I'm actually a doctor. So,
Oh,
somewhere in between my busy life, I write stuff and I publish and I market. Um,
oh.
yeah. And All That Glitters Is Not Gold is the fourth book in my fantasy series. It's a
Mm-hmm.
standalone prequel, but you might want to know that it's my fifth book. I
Mm-hmm.
actually have a children's book that's out already. It's being neglected right now because a lot of my
Oh,
efforts are being focused on All That Glitters, which is coming out
right.
next Tuesday.
Yeah, when I was looking you up because it said like 0 on it, and I was like, 0. So I found your other series, and I was like, okay, I got to get those in because obviously I'm intrigued by this world, and I got to continue this world.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the way distributors label prequels. By
Mm-hmm.
default, it's just a zero. Or you have 0.5s. I've seen
Right.
0.1s too. So
0.25, 0.77. As long as I know. So, would you recommend reading this book in particular before you read your other series, or can you start the series before you start this one?
Hmm. So the nice thing is, and I learned this from my very first editor who helped me with my trilogy, always write every book so that it could be read as a standalone. You never know when someone is just picking up one by itself.
Hmm.
So this can be read standalone. Ideally, you should read the trilogy series first because it's set in quote unquote modern day of the fantasy world that I've built. And then this
Right.
prequel is set like 1,500 years before that. But
Right.
honestly, in terms of the story, I've made it seamless such that if you read the prequel and then read this trilogy series, they answer questions of each
Right.
other. Yeah.
Right.
The only thing I would caution is that because my trilogy series was written first, I feel that All That Glitters is a better representation of the way I write now.
Okay.
I mean, as we go through each novel, each of us improves, and so naturally, I would say, which is my best work, I would say it's this one. You know what I mean? So
Right.
if you read All That Glitters, and then if you read the trilogy, and you find quality doesn't seem the same, yeah, that's because one the prequel comes later.
And you're growing as an author, growing as a writer, so it will reflect that. But I'm
Yeah.
still gonna read it. But.
Yes, please. I don't think it's that terribly written.
No, no. You said you're by day a doctor. What got you into writing fantasy in the first place? Because I'm kind of curious to how that kind of correlates with each other.
If the simple answer is I'm not sure, the long answer does take a while to explain. I guess like many people, I started writing as a teenager to cope with life, isn't it?
Right.
But then, and I wrote through college. I thought it was something that really interested me, but I always thought of it as a hobby. It still is a hobby in a way. Then life got in the way, medical school, residency training, kids,
Right.
and I really only picked it up again during COVID when we were all in lockdown, and it got me thinking about life. And
Mm-hmm.
I grappled with whether or not to embrace this part of me, and then I did, and here we are.
Oh. Oh man, it's like it seems like pandemic has really got a lot of people thinking about what they want, and I love that. Embrace your what's passionate for you guys. I think that's amazing. It's a good creative outlet. Would you stop being a doctor if that's any weird thing to ask?
No,
Continue.
it's not a weird thing. I think all of us who write and publish do have dreams about it. And it really depends. I don't think I'll ever stop being a doctor because it is a large part of who I am. If I become really busy with writing and marketing and all that, and it brings in a good income stream, then yeah, I probably won't practice as much. However, that
Right.
being said, it is because I'm at the stage of my practice that I can pursue this side project or
Right.
passion
Passion
projects.
project, yeah.
Yeah. And the same goes for so many of us. We have to have something that anchors us and helps us
Mm-hmm.
survive on a steady income before we can do this.
Right. That is very true. I am an insurance agent on the side, so this is definitely my passion project. So I get that.
It's amazing the day jobs of people that I've met so far. I mean, like someone is an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
Last week I spoke to a fantasy author who is a pathologist. So amazingly
Oh.
enough, she's a medical doctor by training too, like me.
Uh-huh.
But we're on the complete opposite spectrum of medical specialties. She doesn't
Right.
talk. She doesn't talk to people. The people is my thing. Yeah, and
Uh,
I've also met real estate agents. Yeah, so we're all kinds of people.
I think that's the beauty of the fantasy world or anything people who write in general. It's a creative passion and it can
That's
come
right.
from anywhere and from anybody. Go up to page 30. And I'm only being introduced into this world and I so far I love how it's not like world building heavy. I love so far how it's developing because your characters are written where the Fae is very cruel people in a way. Janella, she has just been crowned, or her coronation and the prophecy that was just spoken over her concerning just the way of their society, which is the Fae. It's not looking good right now. So and it's very mysterious still. You know, we don't know what exactly is about the prophecy that's going to bring down this nation. What brought Janella into in existence? How did you write her character?
Because of my series, it was already
Mm-hmm.
set up that there was this Fey Queen Janella. For some reason, I don't recommend this. For some reason, I already wrote prophecies into it. I don't recommend
Mm-hmm.
prophecies because, oh gosh, you have to make them rhyme or you have to make them not rhyme and then they have to make sense. They have to hide enough, but then they have to tell enough. It can be interpreted in different ways. And then
Right.
the problem is when you publish a book with a prophecy written and you write a prequel, you have to fit everything into it.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
so when I finished the trilogy, I kind of thought I was done with it, even though I had all of this maybe set up, from 1,500 years ago. But then I started reading a few other fantasy books, and I came up with some ideas about how Janella and the nemesis that she ends up fighting in that final prophecy being not just her inner being, but starting out as someone whom she loved and
Mm-hmm.
who went through a corruption arc, which is basically the premise of everything that happens towards the end of the book. So, in order for me to do that, I had to set up the world as being a bad world. That bad world is something the prophecy is trying to fix and something that she is trying to fix. But then the cost of that is that at the end of it, there has to be a nemesis. There has to be that big villain. So if you see my blurb, there is a villain at the end of it,
Mm-hmm.
and that villain emerges at the end of it in order to proceed into the trilogy series. So in a sense, having written the trilogy, the ending of the book was kind of foregone. It's a foregone conclusion. But the the
Mm-hmm.
ex- the exciting thing for the reader is how they get there. And I believe I've
Right.
put enough. I believe I put enough twists and turns to keep people going.
Yeah, because I think I just got to even like a second POV,
Hmm.
which I'm always up for that. Especially he's a human from
Hmm.
what I see, and I was just like, had to stop because I was like, oh yeah, I had to interview the author. Yeah, I just got to that, and so I'm very curious about how that goes because you did talk about a forbidden love in this, and I'm like, oh, is this it? No, so you probably keep all your secrets, but
Oh,
um,
I have to, but then there's so many things I'm like dying to tell people, but I can't.
oh, the
That's
beauty of
frustrating. I'm
it.
like, who can I tell? I can tell my kids who are not gonna talk to any of my readers.
Well, I'll be saying something once I get through it. So you've been talked a lot about your trilogy. How did you come up with this world to begin with?
This story always fascinates people, but it's the truth. When I was I don't know, maybe sometime in residency, even though I was consumed by training to become a psychiatrist,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I am, by the way.
Yeah.
I had a dream. I had two dreams, and
Mm-hmm.
the first dream was about some miscommunication between a king and a queen who were living in two different lands. Then the second dream was about a battle taking place over a desert. And yeah, that pretty much inspired the world. And if you read the first book, it's basically about the daughter of this king and queen trying to reconcile the both of them.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
and that's the world that I have.
It's like asking how it came out to be. I had one author like, yeah, I watched a video game, and so, and I'm like, wow. So it's always fun to ask.
Inspiration strikes in the strangest of ways. I'm like, yeah, I just the other day, and when you're not even thinking about a particular genre, it just comes in. I mean, the other day I was just walking in the park with my husband, and went back to a memory of me somewhere in Japan,
Mhm.
and and my brain was like, hey, this is a setup for a romance meet cute moment. And I'm like, well, I'm not even focusing on that right now. What are you doing? But our creative brains are all like that, right?
I feel like I'm a little lost, just a little bit, because of the fact that I'm still like reading your book. So I'm still blind to everything that's going on. Because I think I just read about the arena and
Uh-huh.
literally sacrificing the humans to the serpents. And I'm trying to, I guess my mind was like, unless this was explained in the trilogy, what are the serpents? Are they like dragons? Are they literally snakes? Because I'm running. So,
Yeah. So they're basically, the Game of Thrones dragons, those big ones.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. My trilogy has smaller dragons. So I think a reader called them wyverns. I don't use that term. I use the term
Right.
I came up with a totally different term, but when you look at the word, okay, it's some kind of dragon, some kind of small dragon.
Yeah.
But then these are the predecessors of those small dragons, and I decided to call them serpents, and yeah, they're the big ones.
Right. That's what I thought, but I was just like, let me clarify that before. Because in my head, I'm like, they described as dragons, but they're used the word as serpents. So I was like, I do like that. We all need dragons in our books. So,
Especially now with Fourth Wing, right? I'm like, man, how did it become so popular? I have dragons in my books too, and I have dragon riders. They're not a major plot point, but they're there.
I'll make sure to put it in my notes, advertising notes. I think I did talk to a reader about how dragons are not incorporated enough in books,
Mhm.
unless there's especially the popular ones. But now it's kind of getting a trend now, so that's good. Was there any kind of challenges or rewards when it comes to writing fantasy compared to other genres? Have you ever entertained writing other genres?
So fantasy is not the first genre I've written. It's the first
Right,
genre I've published. I started out writing about vampires because,
right.
I'm a 90s kid. At that time, vampires were more popular, and I'm not talking about the sparkly ones. The vampires I read about preceded Vampire Academy, so they were Anne Rice's vampires.
Okay.
Yeah, and I always tell people that, the OG morally gray guy is the vampire Lestat. Okay, nobody can top him. He's the one who
Right.
came around and said, "I could kill you, but you'll love me anyway." That was the genre I was writing first. Somewhere along the line, like I said, because of the dreams, I switched to fantasy, and I really enjoy it
Mhm.
because you get to world build, which is very different
Right.
from vampire books. Vampire books tend to be more urban setting, so they're already in
Mhm.
this world. There's nothing much that you need to do besides maybe
Right.
establishing some mythology or some like history.
Background.
Fantasy is so different because of that. But last year I branched out into writing romance,
Mhm.
my first try, and that novel is now in the querying trenches. It's
Okay.
probably not gonna get very far. I'm very tempted to say I'm gonna pull out and just self-publish this too. To answer your question, these are the three genres I've tried: fantasy, vampire. I don't know where you put that. Urban
Yeah.
fantasy, maybe. Yeah,
Yeah,
or
urban
paranormal.
fantasy, romance, yeah. So you talked about world building. How did you approach the world building? Because I know different authors have different techniques. And even what's the struggles of creating your own system, your own world?
I didn't really have an approach. I just thought, okay, this kingdom is going to be a bit more advanced. They have things like revolvers and tanks and maybe early electricity. That kingdom's a bit more backwards. Their streets are still dirty and all that, even though they have magic. But I'm trying to be a bit more systematic and more deliberate about it because what I did was I realized there were a few things missing, like religion
Hmm.
and food. I'm not sure if you're aware, in the part of the world that I live in, we're big foodies.
Right.
That was one thing that was missing in my trilogy. So now, and in my prequel, I don't really put in food a lot, although there is that one character who's always eating. You'll figure out who it is soon. And then now what I'm trying to do is I'm working on sequels to my trilogy.
Hmm.
I put in more food. They're eating breakfast and they're talking. Characters are talking at the same time. Naturally, characters get food poisoning. Things like that. I was just writing a scene just now about someone who got food poisoning. So being a little bit more deliberate about making that fantasy world deeper and richer and tapping
Hmm.
on what's available around us. That can be a challenge. And doing things like that part of the world, they could have certain things that mean this, which I never really explained in my trilogy. I'm being a bit more deliberate about doing that right now. And I think there are bits and pieces of that in All That Glitters.
With foodies being more written into the book, is there anything else that Singapore inspired in this trilogy and in this standalone?
Yeah, sadly, no. But I don't know why it never occurred to me to put in more of my culture into my
Hmm.
trilogy. And for the prequel, it's less of that because it was very easy. It's just one kingdom. We're focusing on one
Right.
kingdom, a bunch of different creatures. So there wasn't much I needed to do in terms of that. But for my sequels, there is another kingdom that's coming into play, and that's very much like Asia. There's gonna be more food in there. Yeah, that somebody was one of the characters is introduced to mango, and he's never had mango before.
It's always fun.
It is. I enjoy writing that.
Can you tell about the magic system that's been created in these books?
So for my trilogy, there's essentially two types of magic systems. Although, as I alluded to, I'm not too in depth with defining how things work. My human characters who can use magic, they
Hmm.
it's a bit more systematized. I kind of wanted them to be a bit like doctors, where they're all trained in an academy style thing to be general practitioners, but then their specialties come out along the way and then they specialize in them. But if you ask them to do a different type of magic, they can do it, but it drains them faster. So that's for humans. Whereas pointy ear magical creatures, the fae or the elves, they can do more generalized type of magic, and they're only limited by how quickly they get tired. That's most of the distinction. I mean, yeah, I try to have some characters again be adept at certain things,
Right.
others not. But I'm not too fixated on that.
And I think I was getting introduced where they're like humans have magic. Like
Hmm.
that's impossible. What is this world coming to?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
I thought that was kind of dramatic, but I thought that was interesting because it expresses the society and the culture and that it's threatening their way of life, and
Hmm.
this is just a smidget of being introduced into this world, and I can already feel like holy crap, what's going to happen. you
Hmm.
know Especially
Yeah,
with our main character, who she just got crowned, and she's going to bring the kind of the almost destruction, but at the same time the peace.
yeah,
But so
yeah.
I thought that was a very good way so far, and I can't wait to see how that goes down.
Can't wait for you to get past that.
Right, right. One question is, how do you balance the need for originality and innovation with the expectations and conviction of fantasy genre? Like, for example, like Fourth Wing comes out, has dragons, has this whole world, or other books that you read, and trying to be more original in your own story.
I would say that it's almost impossible to be very original because there's
Mhm.
so many fantasy books out there, and fantasy is not a new genre, isn't it? You just can't predict what will become popular. So
Mhm.
for me, it's about writing what I want while drawing inspiration from what's going on, or what's popular. What do I mean by that? So Sarah J. Maas is so popular right now.
Mhm.
So are people like Holly Black, who wrote the Cruel Prince series. Yeah, so I kind of use that, but at the same time I was aware that I had to use my own voice and tell
Mhm.
my own story so that it didn't become a copy.
Right.
Yeah, it's hard not to use elements
Mm-hmm.
of what's already out there, because certain things are just fixed, you know? I mean, when you say fae or elf, people expect certain things of it.
Right.
When you
Right.
say mage or dragon, then people, "Ah, okay, this is what I expect." So it's an expectation type of thing. It's about balancing, fulfilling a certain expectation while
Mm-hmm.
at the same time telling your own story. Agree. It's never easy.
Right. Because I think my husband wants to write a fantasy book himself, and he's like, I am not reading any fantasy books. I'm like, why?
so so what I did, that was, I don't know if this spoils it, but my trilogy is fantasy. It's got your usual. It's got dragons, elves, fairies, magical humans, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the villain has an ability to do something that means that there is a presence of another type of creature, which is a little bit not so commonly found in fantasy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because you haven't read it, I
Excuse
don't
me.
want to spoil it.
I'm like, oh, oh boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Um,
so that one, when most of my readers read my trilogy and they're like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting that type of thing in there."
hmm
Yeah, so
Which is, I think, it's the best books. It's the unexpected. I did read a book like that, and it's always good to have the unexpected in there. So I'm looking forward to it now,
okay.
more than ever. So, what is your writing process like? Do you outline? Do you prefer to just write it out and then hash out later, kind of a thing? Do you have habits to make sure you write because you balance the day job and then you have family to balance? So yeah, tell me all of that in a nutshell.
Right, yeah. At heart, I am probably more of a plotter than a pantser. Although
Mhm.
I will admit that there is a beauty to pantsing. So usually for a first draft, what I do is I pants, but I have a very rough idea without writing down too much things. Then as my draft proceeds, things become a little bit clearer, and then I put in more notes, things like that. And then usually what happens is when I go back and edit, that's when things become a bit more plotty rather than pantser-ish. By necessity, you have to plot better as your
Mhm.
story progresses. You can't keep pantsing, otherwise pantsing you pants yourself into a corner, and then you're like, I don't know what
Like
to
how
do
did I get
next.
there?
Yeah, there is an author that I connected with on Instagram. Her name is Liesel West, and
Okay.
she had a really good term for that process of writing that first draft. It's called a discovery draft. So you don't pant your whole way through it. You have a rough outline. It's basically she basically put a name to the process I already do, which is
Mhm.
writing out roughly what you have, discovering what's happening, like discovering a little bit of, this character's got this trait or that character went through that experience. And then after that, it becomes a bit more of a solid structured story.
Oh.
So that's kind of, yeah, that's kind of how I do it. But then day to day, you were wondering, right? How do I find the time? I always tell people that, in fact, if I didn't find the time, or if I didn't take the time to do this, which I do use as a very major form of self care for myself, then I wouldn't really thrive. Yeah.
Wow.
Up to a few years ago, when I was just reading as a hobby, I felt okay. I think my husband and I reflected that my life is a lot more enriched now, and I feel like I'm taking care of myself more now that I get to write and carve out time to write.
That's crazy that you say that because I just was talking to somebody else about that because I was very burned out in my own business,
Hmm.
my actual day job. And I was like, I need something. I need something to just get my creative outlet out because I was not creative. I was just like dead inside. And it's always fun that something like that can just awaken us as
Yeah.
people. And then it reflects in our daily life and with the people that we're with. So I love
Yeah.
that how you said that because I definitely resonate. I just said it yesterday. And, and I like the writing process because that I wrote it down because I'm like, oh, that's not a bad idea.
Well,
you
okay,
know.
yeah. So Liesel, Liesl, her last name is West, West, or the pen name that she's going by, Liesel West. She's the one
Hmm.
who used the term discovery draft. I don't know if it's original to her, or I don't know if she
Right.
pulled it from somewhere, but I know that she put a post on it, and I was like, oh, I love that term. I'm gonna start using it.
Right, right, because you just get it out and then you discover more about it, and then you refine it after that. And I think that's
That's
really
right.
cool, actually. Yeah, because you got to get it out of your head first.
Hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
and I've learned the art of carrying a notebook wherever you go. I used to think that that would make me look silly, but now I'm old enough. I'm like, you know what? I don't care.
No,
Who cares
it's
what you think
like
of me and my pen and notebook?
I'm pretty sure some people do some weirder things than that, and they're judging you. You can't escape it. It's just. As we embark on this journey together, we need your support and ensure our quest continues to flourish. Here are a few ways you can help us. 1. Subscribe. Make sure to hit your subscribe button on your favorite podcast platform. By subscribing, you'll never miss an episode, and you'll be the first one to know the new adventures released in the realm of fantasy. 2. Rate and review. Leave us a glowing review on your podcast platform of your choice. Your feedback not only fills our hearts with joy, but also helps other fantasy enthusiasts discover our podcast and join in our adventure. 3. Share with fellow adventurers. Spread the word about Brooktrovert Reader Podcast. Share our episodes on social media, recommend us to your friends, and engage in conversations about your favorite moments. 4. Support us through subscriptions. Your support makes it possible for us to continue bringing you captivating content. Your support keeps the magic alive. Head over to my website to get started today. By subscribing, rating, reviewing, and sharing, you become an integral part of our quest to celebrate the beauty of fantasy literature. Together, let's ignite the imaginations of countless dreamers and create a haven where stories come to life. It. What do you find the most challenging thing about writing fantasy, and how do you overcome those challenges?
The fact that sometimes things get so big, you wonder how you got there. I remember when I wrote the third book of my trilogy, I had a spreadsheet out with that was called timelines and threads,
Mm-hmm.
because I had it's multi point of view. The story is moving in three different places in the world before weaving together for the
Mm-hmm.
conclusion. I had to I had to use spreadsheets to keep everything straight.
Oh.
This character is there, they're doing that now, and then at the same time this is happening, and it's not a pleasant experience because it requires you to get organized, and
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately it's par for the course. So when I wrote my prequel, that was a lot easier because everything flows linearly. What I had to write down was, this character belongs to that house, this character belongs to that house is called this, don't change the name halfway, and just roughly come up with, okay, this house is called that because like that. Even though it doesn't get into the final book, it's fine as long as I remember a little bit. And yeah, so keeping things straight tends to be the hardest thing, especially as you write your series towards the more epic conclusion. So I tend to write in
Mm-hmm.
a more epic style. For my sequels, I know there's this like huge battle coming up, and I haven't even gotten there, and I know it's gonna be messy.
Do you, like, with your characters, I know some people, I've heard some instructions saying, like, have your character's personality written out way before you start writing. And I'm like, is that really prevalent for you, or?
I've heard that advice before. I see the benefit of it. I
Mm-hmm.
wish I could. Oftentimes, I discover my character's character while writing them. Yeah, and then it's only then that I kind of go back a little bit and say, okay, he's like that, she's like that. Yeah, so that's the pantsing part of me.
The pantsing, yeah. I see the benefit of it, but then it's like you said, the discovery is when, as you're writing it, you kind of discover who this person is
Yeah.
as you're writing it, or character development, character growth, and that's kind of like what I like fantasy novels, because you sometimes can see it. So we got, how do you approach development of secondary characters? Because I being introduced into, I guess her cousin, I guess her
Yeah.
cousin,
Yeah.
and then her uncle's daughter's being introduced kind of in a way, or in
Mm.
the kind of being a rival because she wasn't chosen to be queen.
Hmm.
So how did you approach those characters?
Sometimes they just kind of pop up, and sometimes I know they need to be there. Okay, so I grew up with a huge family, so
Okay.
a lot of my characters, immediate supporting characters, are family members, or they're related in some way, because I feel that the family dynamic makes things really interesting. So there's gonna be that element, like that's my cousin and that's my cousin, but they're not directly related, that kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. But yeah, so to answer your question, sometimes secondary characters just pop up, which can be a challenge because you run into the danger of having too big of a cast. And I know that I've inadvertently done that with the stuff I'm writing now. So as much as it pains me, I know eventually I have to pare down, combine people. Yeah, I think it's something I have to accept.
Yeah, I think one time I saw a meme like "Be nice to me or I'll kill you" in my novel. Just-
Or yeah,
uh-huh.
or be nice to me, or your name is gonna come up, and it might not be a nice person.
People in your life can inspire you to write these characters.
Mhm.
Are you worried about them going, "Hey, that sounds like me"? Are you worried about that?
Okay, the sad thing is, even if I have written elements of my own big family into my books,
Mhm.
my family hasn't really read my books. Yeah, so I'm
Okay.
one of those people, I'm working pretty much in a silo. I'm not in danger of that. Now, the other danger I might run into is, oh, I meet a lot of people every day, and these are patients.
Mhm.
Do I write their stories into my books? And the answer is a straight no. I meet too many people to have a distinct story that sticks out. But I don't deny that meeting a lot of people on a regular basis allows me to capture the emotions that are
Mhm.
going on in my characters. It could be someone who's grieving from the loss of a significant other
Mhm.
in my practice, right? And then
Right.
I use that emotion to do something similar. Not that I say that a character lost someone, but I capture the grief, that
Right.
the tears, the sleeplessness, yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because I think before I jumped on, I was even reading about the human who, at a very young age, was thrown into the arena. And now he's recalling those
Hmm.
emotions and those feelings about being in there the first time, about even 7 or 8 years later, he still feels it. So I'm like, now it kind of explains it a little bit with your background and everything, the emotions.
I tell people there's no need for me to say that it's PTSD or anything like that.
Right.
If I know what I'm doing, you'll know what it is.
And it comes out. And I like that because sometimes people don't talk about trauma,
Hmm.
too much. It's
Or
always
sometimes I feel they overdo it. I don't know.
they're
Yeah.
broody man, and this is their sad background and this is why who they are, but you don't actually kind of live it, understand that
Yeah.
character and with their point of view and where they're coming from and why it's traumatic to them.
Yeah.
We don't see that very often, and I like that a lot. Just so I'm looking forward to exploring more about it, especially since you're, like you said, your psychology background. So
Although
see.
ironically, when people ask, sometimes when they ask whether my novels have reps in it, I can't say that it's really mental health.
you're you
That's just a bit of a ironic irony.
I didn't even think about that, which is very interesting. But I just like how you're exploring it and you're not like focusing on it. I guess in my
Mm.
world, because sometimes I like want to go in the world to forget. So let's not
Well,
rehash.
yeah, I mean that's why books have content warnings, trigger warnings
Hmm.
nowadays. I think it's useful. Although I might say that again, 90s kid, I grew up in a generation where there were no warnings about nothing. Okay, you just this book looks popular. It's got this blurb. Just read it. Who cares how damaged you emerged? Yeah. When I was your age, in fact, a little bit younger, I read my first VC Andrews book.
Mm.
So Flowers in the Attic. That was my introduction. I was and on hindsight, I'm like, oh my goodness. And all of us in school were reading that. No trigger warning, no content warning at all.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna look that up now because I never heard of that one before.
Okay, it's a really old book. VC Andrews is notorious though. I think she's from the South, it must be. And she writes all
Oh,
this. Are
it's
you
like a
looking at
horror
your
horror or something.
No, no, there's yeah, I don't even want to say the stuff that's in her books.
No,
Flowers in the
I
Attic. That's her first book. Very, very famous.
yeah, I'm just gonna keep to my happy world. Oh, I'm such a happy ending lover. I am kind of leaning towards the morally gray characters a lot lately. We'll see what
Because they're
happens.
fun.
If you have any advice for any aspiring authors looking to go into the genre or just write indie, what would advice would you give to anybody?
The bottom line is, and the good thing about doing what I do is that sometimes I get to talk to kids, including my
Mm-hmm.
own kids. And I always say, if you want to write, you got to read first, and
Mm,
read all kinds of stuff.
right.
Read comics, read fiction, read nonfiction. Although I don't like reading nonfiction, but read anything you can get your hands on. Develop a good foundation for whatever language you want to write in. For me,
Mm-hmm.
it's English. And then, in order to get started, you just got to start writing. Whatever you churn out in the beginning is going to be trashy. It's going to be cringy. But as you write, you refine. You read books about writing. You continue to read other people's books and learn how to. In the beginning, you might be copying someone's style, and
Mm-hmm.
someone's way of writing. Eventually, you'll find your own voice. But that's how a lot of us start out. We go to the books that inspire us. We try to write something similar, and then we create our own stories from there.
I did an episode about reading one-star reviews, and sometimes people have opinions about almost
Mhm.
everything. Does that help you critique your writing, or do you just ignore it, or you just like to just feed off the positive reviews? I'm I want to start asking that question because I'm kind of curious about how people respond to that.
Yeah, I've gotten 1 or 2 star reviews that have no feedback. So
Oh, that's hard.
sometimes, yeah. But for this latest book, I've had a few readers, handful of them did not finish, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the good thing is they explain why
Right.
they did not finish. One of them was really critical and said that I couldn't do anything right. So that was really sad.
Oh,
But
oh
to
my
be fair,
gosh.
that came on the heels of a handful of 5 star reviews, so I didn't take that one too seriously. One of them didn't finish because they felt the book was too heavy emotionally. I think they knew
Mm,
they could see that there was going to be some turmoil coming, and there is going to be, so warning to you. And they didn't want to finish it because and they were so nice. They said that it's me, not you problem. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, but in general, what is helpful is if the reviews generally say the same thing, then I know, okay, this is something that I do need to work on. But yeah, I mean, as a writer, it's hard to not focus on the negative reviews,
Mm-hmm.
or even wonder, why are people not finishing my book, or why are people not reading my book? And as much as we tell each other, don't look at your reviews, it's very tempting to. So, yes, I do feed off the good ones.
Yeah, because I think that when I was looking through it and doing my research on it, I just like, man, it's like we need to understand why I didn't like the book. So, okay, and as an author, I bet that helps critique a little bit.
It does, but
Yeah.
the best critique I've had, are from the people who directly reached out to me and didn't put up reviews. If
Mm,
you know what I mean. Yeah. So,
right.
they're the ones who, I mean, yeah, I've had a handful of people who say, okay, I feel this could have been done better in this way, or this book that you have with you, All That Glitters Is Not Gold. The
Mm-hmm.
first draft or the early draft, the first few chapters were read by some folks who gave really good feedback just based on the first few chapters. And then that resulted in me tearing down the whole first draft and then writing a whole new draft, which is what you
Mm-hmm.
have before you. And there are so many elements. The core elements of the story are there, but there are so many things that are so different about it. It's almost unrecognizable from the first draft. And so, if not for that type of feedback, you wouldn't have the product you have before you.
Yeah, it's true. I like that.
But it stings sometimes. Yeah, no doubt about it.
Yeah, and a lot of people say like, oh, they put their hardest in it. You shouldn't say anything, and I'm like, it's good to have critique, but it's also a good way to you got to have a good critique, not they can't do anything right. Well, can you do better? Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, but I mean, something my husband tells me, I mean, he's really super supportive of what I do, and he tells me that, I mean, when you put your work out there, you cannot assume that everybody will like it. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yes, it feels like you're putting a part of yourself out there, but you need to disconnect a little bit from that feeling. Though that feeling was a lot stronger when I first published, it's kind of become a bit more, yes, it's true. I can look at things a little bit more objectively. Although,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what, you shouldn't say anything bad about my book babies. Yeah.
Book babies.
They are my book babies.
I just want to thank you for just sharing your novel with me. I'm looking forward to finishing it and embracing your world. I probably am going to do the trilogy because I just so far I love this world.
That's
If
good
there's
to hear.
if there's anything you would like to say to my readers before we go.
Okay. Well, the first thing is, you are the only one holding a physical copy right now.
Woo! I'm so honored.
Yes. And the only reason why I'm not holding the same proof copy that you have is because shipping costs twice as much to send a
Ah.
proof copy to me. It was cheaper just to send it to you and have you take some pictures and show me if things were working out. Yes. So you're the only one with a proof copy right now,
Good.
besides the warty one that I have.
Okay.
The other thing is, yeah, my book is releasing. I'm very excited about it because it's the first time I'm actually doing things properly. All my other
Mm-hmm.
books never got like a hype,
Right.
excerpts, a proper launch date, things like that. This is the one
Right.
where I'm doing it as properly as possible. The funny thing is I don't even know what I'm going to do on launch day. Yesterday I just posted on Instagram. Can you guys please tell me what I'm supposed to do? I'm thinking of posting pictures of my pets. And everyone's like, yes, pet photos. I'm like, really? You want to see pet photos on launch day? Okay. Yeah. And the other thing that I want to say is that I'm not done with this world, or rather, this world is not
Okay.
done with me. I have more stuff coming. I don't know when it'll
Yay.
come. I don't know when it'll come out because I still want to publish my vampire stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and there's my romance book somewhere out there, but we'll see. I have lots more stuff coming up. Yeah. And I really thank you for having me here. I really appreciate it.
Problem. So, for all the listeners, it's July 25th. All That Glitters Is Not Gold by Linda Ling. It's going to be in on Amazon and anywhere else where they can find this book.
For now, it's just Amazon, so it'll be on
Just
Amazon
Amazon.
and on KU.
Oh, Kindle Limited. Okay.
Yeah.
I love it.
I
So,
have no bandwidth to try and go wider, even though I know it might be a good idea. I can't. I tried. I can't.
and
Mhm.
then as you continue to grow, your skills will grow. Thank you for joining me, Miss Linda, and I'm looking forward to finishing this and this to be published on July 25th.
Thank you for
All
having
right.
me.
Thank you, readers, for listening to my podcast on fantasy books. I hope you're enjoying the content and finding it helpful in discovering new books to read. If you have a moment, please consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform. Also, don't forget to follow me on Instagram at BookTrovertReader to stay updated on new episodes and other book-related content. Thank you again for your support and happy reading.